The cabin fell silent as Zara Johnson collapsed in the aisle, her body trembling, breath shallow. "Probably drugs," someone muttered, pulling out their phone instead of helping. The flight attendant hesitated, her eyes full of judgment instead of concern. Zara's bracelet engraved "sickle cell anemia" glinted under the cabin light unnoticed. Then the door burst open. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped inside, his voice cutting through the murmurs like thunder. "That's my daughter." The passengers froze, realizing too late that their ignorance had turned a medical emergency into a moment of public shame that would shake an entire airline. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to catch more incredible true stories about how discrimination can happen to anyone regardless of their NS status. Now let's find out what happened before this billionaire dad walked onto that plane. 17-year-old Zara Johnson stood in front of her bedroom mirror, straightening her crisp white blouse. Her reflection showed a confident young woman with bright eyes and natural hair styled in neat twists. The acceptance letter to Yale University was prominently displayed on her bulletin board alongside science fair medals and academic awards. Beneath her composed exterior, however, she felt the familiar anxiety of traveling alone with sickle cell anemia. "Zara, are you packed?" called a deep voice from downstairs. "Almost done, Dad," she replied, tucking her medication into her carry-on bag. Elijah Johnson appeared in the doorway moments later. At 45, he cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered in his tailored suit with closely cropped salt and pepper hair. Few people would recognize him as the founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies, a company valued at over $12 billion. Elijah had always maintained a low profile, preferring to let his innovations speak for themselves. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Jackson and Keith can accompany you to Boston. They'll stay out of your way during the competition." Zara zipped her suitcase with more force than necessary. "Dad, we've been over this. I don't need bodyguards to attend a science competition. It's not about the competition. It's about your condition." Concern etched lines around his eyes. "You're still adjusting to the new medication, which is working fine," she countered. "I haven't had a crisis in months. Besides, how am I supposed to live a normal college life?" With security hovering around the mention of college made Elijah's expression soften. They'd had this conversation many times since her acceptance to Yale. He wanted protection. She wanted independence. "Dr. Lawson said that I'm stable as long as I take my medication, stay hydrated, and avoid stress." Zara finished. "I know my body, Dad. I've been managing this my whole life." Elijah studied his daughter's determined face, so much like her mother's. The thought of Victoria brought a familiar ache. She had died from complications of the same disease that Zara fought when their daughter was only 7. The memory strengthened his resolve. "At least take the private jet." Zara shook her head. "Commercial is fine. Skyline has direct flights to Boston." She approached her father and took his hands. "I need to do this on my own." After a moment, Elijah nodded reluctantly. "Promise me you'll take your medication on schedule and call me if anything feels wrong." "I promise," she said, hugging him tightly. 3 hours later, Zara entered the bustling Atlanta International Airport, rolling her small suitcase behind her. Her boarding pass for Skyline Airways Flight 347 to Boston showed a first-class seat, her father's one non-negotiable concession. As she navigated the security line, Zara noticed the subtle ways people created distance between themselves and her. A woman pulled her purse closer. A man in a business suit chose a longer line rather than stand behind her. These were familiar microaggressions, barely perceptible, but unmistakable to those who experienced them daily. Boarding began 30 minutes later. When Zara presented her ticket at the gate, the attendant's eyes widened slightly. "First class?" the woman asked, scrutinizing her boarding pass longer than necessary. "Yes," Zara replied, evenly accustomed to the implication that she didn't belong. "On the plane." A blonde flight attendant with Heather Mitchell on her name tag stopped Zara as she approached her seat. "Excuse me," Heather said with a tight smile. "This is the first-class cabin." I know, Zara replied, handing over her boarding pass. Sat 3A. Heather examined the ticket, frowning slightly before returning it. Very well. Can I see some ID? Zara produced her driver's license, maintaining eye contact as Heather compared the photo to her face. No other first-class passengers had been asked to verify their identity. Thank you, Miss Johnson. Heather finally said, stepping aside. Heather examined the ticket, frowning slightly before returning it. Very well. Can I see some ID? The middle-aged white couple in the row across from her whispered to each other, glancing repeatedly in her direction. Zara put on her noise-cancelling headphones, determined to ignore them and the growing discomfort in her lower back. She was going to prove to her father and herself that she could handle this trip independently. As the plane taxied toward the runway, she closed her eyes and focused on the science competition ahead. Her research on genetic markers for sickle cell anemia could potentially revolutionize early detection and treatment. This was her moment, and nothing was going to spoil it, especially not her own body betraying her. 2 hours into the flight, Zara Johnson's world narrowed to the rhythmic pounding of pain radiating through her body. What had begun as a mild discomfort had escalated into the unmistakable symptoms of a sickle cell crisis. Her joints ached as though they were being crushed in a vice, and waves of nausea threatened to overwhelm her. She had ignored the early warning signs, postponing her medication in a misguided attempt to prove her independence. Now, as the plane cruised at $30,000 FT, she was paying the price for that decision. Zara pressed the flight attendant call button, her finger trembling. The small overhead light illuminated, but minutes passed with no response. Through pain-blurred vision, she watched Heather Mitchell move efficiently through the first-class cabin, refreshing drinks and responding to other passengers' requests while studiously avoiding eye contact with Zara. After pressing the button a second and third time, Zara raised her hand as Heather passed by with a tray of champagne glasses. "Excuse me," Zara said, her voice strained. "I need my medication from my carry-on in the overhead compartment. I'm not feeling well." Heather's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be with you shortly," she replied, continuing to distribute champagne to the other first-class passengers. The pain intensified, causing Zara to curl forward in her seat. Her breathing became shallow as the crisis escalated. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, a dangerous sign that her oxygen levels were dropping as her sickled blood cells clumped together, blocking small blood vessels. "Please," Zara called out more urgently as Heather passed by again. "I really need my medication now. It's an emergency. You'll have to wait," Heather responded dismissively. "We're in the middle of service." A male flight attendant with dark skin and Raymond Davis on his name tag noticed Zara's distress from the galley. He approached her seat, concern evident on his face. "Are you okay, miss?" he asked, crouching beside her. "Sickle cell crisis," Zara managed between gasps. "My medication. Overhead bin. Blue bag." Raymond straightened immediately. "I'll get it right away." As he reached for the overhead compartment, Heather intercepted him. "Raymond, we're still completing first-class meal service," she said sharply. "She's in medical distress," Raymond countered, keeping his voice low. "It's probably just air sickness," Heather replied. "These kids always exaggerate." The implication behind these kids wasn't lost on either Raymond or Zara. The pain surged again, more intense than before. Zara knew she needed to act quickly. Despite the agony, she unbuckled her seatbelt and attempted to stand. "I can get it myself," she said, gripping the headrest for support as she pulled herself upright. "Miss, please remain seated," during Heather began. "I have sickle cell anemia." Zara interrupted each word in effort. "I'm having a crisis. If I don't get my medication now, I could." Her sentence remained unfinished. The cabin tilted violently as her blood pressure plummeted. Zara's knees buckled, and she collapsed into the aisle, her consciousness fading as she hit the carpet. Through the encroaching darkness, she was vaguely aware of voices and movement around her. Passengers craned their necks to see what was happening. Several held up phones recording the incident, rather than offering assistance. Probably drugs, a man whispered loudly enough to be heard across several rows. These kids today, an older woman commented, shaking her head. Raymond knelt beside Zara's unconscious form, checking her pulse. We need medical assistance immediately. He called out, his professional demeanor cracking slightly with urgency. Heather stood frozen for a moment before her training kicked in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical situation. Please remain calm and in your seats, she announced, though her tone suggested more annoyance than concern as darkness consumed the last of her awareness. Zara's final coherent thought was that she had failed. Failed to prove her independence, failed to manage her condition, and failed to make it to the competition that meant everything to. Most of all, she had failed her father, who had predicted exactly this scenario. In the growing commotion around her unconscious body, no one noticed that her medical alert bracelet had slipped into view from beneath her sleeve, plainly identifying her condition in red lettering against a silver background. Raymond Davis pressed 2 fingers against Zara's neck, relieved to find a steady pulse despite her unconscious state. Around them, the first-class cabin had erupted into a buzz of whispers and speculation, punctuated by the electronic clicks of smartphone cameras. "Give her some space," Raymond called out to the gathering crowd of onlookers. He loosened Zara's collar and placed his folded jacket beneath her head, basic first aid training guiding his actions. Heather Mitchell pushed through her authority as senior flight attendant, manifesting in the rigid set of her shoulders. "I'll handle this," she said, motioning for Raymond to step aside. She mentioned sickle cell anemia before she collapsed. Raymond explained, remaining firmly in place. "We should check for a medical alert bracelet or ID." Heather's lips thinned. "Let's not jump to conclusions. For all we know, this could be an overdose situation." Raymond stared at her in disbelief. "She's a teenager traveling alone to I've seen it all in my 15 years of flying." Heather cut him off, addressing her words to the watching passengers as much as to Raymond. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control. We have a medical situation, but there's nothing to worry about. Please return to your seats." The cabin intercom crackled. "This is Captain Morris speaking. We've been informed of a medical situation in the cabin. Flight attendants prepare for potential emergency protocols." A middle-aged Latina woman with silver-streaked black hair stood up from her business class seat. "I'm a doctor," she announced, moving toward the scene. "Emergency medicine at Massachusetts General." Heather stepped into her path. "Thank you, but we have the situation under control." "She's unconscious on the floor," the doctor replied evenly. "I'd say that's far from under control." "Protocol dictates," Heather began. "Protocol dictates that you accept medical assistance when available," the doctor interrupted, producing her hospital ID. "Dr. Patricia Alvarez. Now please step aside." With obvious reluctance, Heather allowed Dr. Alvarez to kneel beside Zara. Raymond watched the interaction with growing unease, remembering similar incidents during his 3 years with Skyline Airways. Heather Mitchell had a reputation among crew members of color. Last year, she had reported a Somali passenger as suspicious for reading Arabic text on his phone, which turned out to be a digital Quran. 6 months ago, she had questioned a black family's first-class tickets on a flight to Paris until the father produced his diplomatic credentials. The airline had quietly handled both complaints without formal disciplinary action. As Dr. Alvarez examined, Zara Raymond spotted the medical alert bracelet on her wrist. "Doctor, look," he said, pointing to the silver band. "Sickle cell anemia," Dr. Alvarez read aloud. "She's having a crisis. We need to act quickly." She looked up at Raymond. "Does she have medication with her?" Before Raymond could answer, Heather interjected. "Let's not be hasty. She could be faking to get attention. Teenagers do that." Dr. Alvarez's expression hardened. "This is a life-threatening medical emergency, not a bid for attention. She needs oxygen and pain management immediately, and her medication if available." "I'll check her carry-on," Raymond said, moving to the overhead bin. Raymond Heather said sharply, "We don't go through passengers' belongings without authorization." She asked for her medication before she collapsed. He counted, already retrieving a blue backpack. As he searched the bag, he found a wallet containing Zara's ID and a medical information card listing emergency contacts, her condition, and current medications. Found it, he announced, holding up a prescription bottle hydroxyurate, and her emergency contact is Elijah Johnson. Dr. Alvarez looked up from monitoring Zara's vital signs. This is a sickle cell crisis, not an overdose. We need to divert to the nearest airport. She requires immediate hospital treatment. Heather's nostrils flared slightly. Captain makes that decision, not passengers. I'm not speaking as a passenger, Dr. Alvarez replied coolly. I'm speaking as a physician identifying a medical emergency. She's probably just dehydrated, Heather insisted. Or maybe she took something before boarding. These situations are rarely what they seem. Raymond had heard enough. What exactly do you mean by these situations, Heather? He asked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The tension between them was palpable. Heather's eyes widened at the public challenge from her subordinate. This is not the time, Raymond, she hissed. No, I think it is, he persisted. Would you have the same suspicions if she was a white teenager in first class, a middle-aged white man in seat 2C cleared his throat? The attendant has a point. You don't see many of them in first class without something fishy going on. Shocked murmurs rippled through the cabin at the openly racist comment. Dr. Alvarez looked up from attending to Zara. Sir, I suggest you keep such opinions to yourself. The intercom crackled again. This is your captain speaking. After consultation with medical services on the ground, we will be making an emergency landing in Cleveland. Please remain seated and follow all crew instructions. Heather's face flushed. She hadn't been consulted about this decision. I need to speak with the captain, she said, moving toward the cockpit. Raymond blocked her path. I already informed him of Dr. Alvarez's assessment via the crew phone, he said quietly. Patient care comes before protocol or prejudice. As flight attendants secured the cabin for an unscheduled landing, Raymond knelt beside Dr. Alvarez. How is she stable for now, but she needs proper medical care soon, the doctor replied. Quick thinking with the medication. You might have saved her life. Raymond nodded grimly, watching as Heather directed other crew members with barely concealed anger. He knew his actions would have consequences for his career, but watching Zara's shallow breathing, he couldn't bring himself to regret challenging the discrimination he'd witnessed too many times before. What no one on the plane yet realized was that this incident would have consequences far beyond one flight's unscheduled landing consequences that would begin the moment Elijah Johnson set foot on the aircraft. Elijah Johnson sat at the head of a gleaming conference table in the Boston headquarters of Venture Capital Partners. The room's floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. 6 executives in tailored suits hung on his every word as he outlined the final terms of a $3 billion investment in their quantum computing division. With this agreement, Elijah said, his deep voice commanding attention, Horizon Technologies will become your primary hardware partner for the next decade. His fingers hovered above the digital contract displayed on the table's surface. The sharp buzz of his phone interrupted the moment. Elijah would normally never check messages during such a crucial negotiation, but the specific vibration pattern indicated an emergency alert from the family medical monitoring system. Excuse me, he said, glancing at his phone. The blood drained from his face as he read the notification. Medical emergency, Zara Johnson. Severe crisis indicators. Location moving altitude 30 FT. Without hesitation, Elijah stood. I need to postpone this signing. Family emergency, the lead executive rose in concern. Mr. Johnson, is everything all right? No, Elijah replied tersely, already dialing his assistant. Reschedule for tomorrow morning. I apologize for the inconvenience. As he strode from the conference room, his assistant Jennifer met him in the hallway, already on her tablet. Sir Zara's having a crisis on her flight, he explained, his voice tight with controlled panic. Get the jet ready immediately and find out exactly where her plane is now. Right away, sir. Within 15 minutes, Elijah was airborne in his private Gulfstream, the pilot pushing the aircraft to its maximum speed. As they flew, Jennifer coordinated with air traffic control to track Skyline Flight 347. They've diverted to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport for a medical emergency, she reported. Landing in approximately 20 minutes. Elijah nodded grimly. Have my car waiting at the tarmac in Cleveland and contact the airport director. I need immediate access to that plane when it lands. As the jet cut through the clouds, Elijah's mind raced with memories and fears. Had Zara's condition ever been this serious before? How long had she been in crisis? Was she alone, frightened, surrounded by strangers? He thought back to his own journey from a small apartment in Oakland, where he'd built his first network server to community college classes while working night shifts to the breakthrough algorithm that had launched his company into the stratosphere of tech valuation. Through it all, he'd faced assumptions, closed doors, and the constant need to prove himself beyond what any white entrepreneur would experience. Sir Jennifer interrupted his thoughts. I have more information. A passenger on the flight posted on social media about a teenage girl who collapsed in first class. The comments are problematic. She handed him her tablet, displaying a video of Zara unconscious on the airplane floor. Flight attendants hovering nearby. The caption read, "Drama in first class today. Girl passed out drugs. Number skyline drama." Elijah's jaw clenched as he scrolled through comments speculating about drug use, questioning how someone like her could afford a first-class ticket and making other racist assumptions. The memory of Victoria Zara's mother flooded back with painful clarity. Brilliant, beautiful Victoria, who had fought sickle cell disease her entire life, until complications from pneumonia had overwhelmed her body when Zara was 7. On Victoria's last day, a hospital nurse had questioned whether she really needed additional pain medication, implying addiction rather than recognizing genuine suffering. The same prejudice that had added needless agony to his wife's final hours was now threatening his daughter. 3 minutes to landing, Sir, the pilot announced over the intercom. As the private jet touched down in Cleveland, Elijah steeled himself for what lay ahead. He had spent his career avoiding public attention, letting his innovation speak louder than his identity. But today, he would use every ounce of his influence and resources to protect his daughter. What happens when a father's worst nightmare collides with systemic prejudice? Comment number 1. If you believe Elijah should sue the airline for discrimination, or comment number 2, if you think he should use his influence to create systemic change instead. Will Zara recover from this life-threatening crisis? And how will the flight crew react when they realize whose daughter they've been neglecting? Like this video and subscribe to find out what happens when this billionaire father confronts the airline staff who failed his daughter because of their prejudice. The moment Elijah's private jet came to a stop on the tarmac, he was already unbuckling his seatbelt. Would justice come from legal action? Or would Elijah find another way to address the discrimination his daughter faced? Let's continue this incredible true story and find out. The Skyline Airways plane had barely completed its emergency landing at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport when Elijah Johnson's town car screeched to a halt on the tarmac. Airport security personnel, already briefed about the situation, escorted him directly to the aircraft. Elijah moved with controlled urgency. His 6.2 frame-cutting and imposing figure in his tailored charcoal suit. His face, usually composed for business negotiations, now displayed the raw concern of a father racing to his child's side. "Sir, they're deplaning the other passengers first," a security officer explained as they approached. "My daughter needs medical attention," Elijah replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone unaccustomed to being denied. "I'm going in now." At the plane's entrance, an airport supervisor attempted to intervene. "Mr. Johnson protocol requires, my daughter is having a sickle cell crisis." Elijah cut him off. "Every minute matters. Stand aside." The supervisor hesitated only briefly before stepping away from the door. When Elijah entered the aircraft, the scene in first class stopped him cold. Zara lay unconscious in the aisle, a middle-aged woman kneeling beside her. Raymond Davis stood protectively nearby, while Heather Mitchell was addressing the remaining passengers about deplaning procedures her back to Zara. "That's my daughter Elijah," announced his voice reverberating through the cabin. "What's happening here?" The reaction was immediate. Heads turned, conversations halted, and phones rose to capture the moment. Heather Mitchell spun around, her practiced smile freezing when she recognized the distinguished black man standing in the entryway. Even those unfamiliar with Elijah Johnson's face knew power when they saw it. "So you can't be on the aircraft during deplaning?" Heather stammered, her demeanor shifting from authoritative to uncertain in seconds. Ignoring her, Elijah moved directly to Zara, kneeling beside the woman attending to her. "I'm her father." "How is she?" "Dr. Patricia Alvarez," the woman introduced herself. "Your daughter is stable but needs hospital care immediately. She's experiencing a severe sickle cell crisis." Elijah nodded gratefully. "Thank you for helping her." He gently took Zara's hand, noting the medical alert bracelet prominently displayed on her wrist. "Has she received her medication?" "Yes, thanks to this flight attendant." Dr. Alvarez gestured to Raymond. He found her emergency medication while others were less helpful. Raymond stepped forward. "Raymond Davis, sir. I tried to assist as soon as I realized something was wrong, but there was some delay in our response." Delay. Elijah's voice was dangerously quiet. Heather approached composure somewhat recovered. "Mr. Johnson, I assure you, we followed all company protocols for medical emergencies. If you'll allow us to transfer your daughter to the paramedics now waiting outside." The paramedics should have been called the moment she mentioned her condition. And Raymond interjected, his professional demeanor cracking slightly before she collapsed. Elijah's gaze sharpened. "She told you she had sickle cell anemia." The cabin fell silent. Several passengers who had been filming the interaction lowered their phones, suddenly uncomfortable with their voyeurism. So Heather began. "Passengers often exaggerate. Would you have treated her differently if she looked like you?" Elijah asked, his question slicing through Heather's excuses. The flight attendant's face flushed. "That's not I would never. We have protocols." "Your protocols nearly cost my daughter her life," Elijah said, rising to his full height. His controlled fury filled the cabin more effectively than any shouting could have. "I want to know why an unconscious black teenager was assumed to be on drugs rather than experiencing a documented medical emergency." A businessman in 2C, who had made the earlier racist comment, attempted to slip unnoticed toward the exit. Sir Elijah addressed him. "You had something to say about these people in first class earlier. Perhaps you'd care to repeat your observation now." The man quickened his pace, disappearing down the aisle without response. Elijah surveyed the first-class cabin, noting the passengers who had been recording rather than helping. "I see many of you found my daughter's medical emergency entertaining enough to film. Did any of you think to offer assistance?" Shame-faced glances were exchanged as passengers avoided eye contact. A soft moan from Zara interrupted the tense silence. Her eyelids fluttered open, confusion evident as she tried to orient herself. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elijah immediately returned his attention to his daughter, his expression softening. "I'm here, Zara. You're going to be okay." "The competition," she murmured. "Don't worry about that now." He soothed, squeezing her hand gently. Paramedics arrived with a stretcher, and Dr. Alvarez briefed them on Zara's condition. As they prepared to transport her, the Skyline Airways captain emerged from the cockpit, looking grave. "Mr. Johnson," he said, extending his hand. "Captain Morris, I want to personally apologize for what happened on my aircraft today." Elijah accepted the handshake with a curtain nod. "I appreciate that, Captain, but this goes beyond apologies." As paramedics carefully transferred Zara to the stretcher, she briefly regained consciousness again. "Dad, don't make a scene," she whispered, showing a flash of her usual spirit despite her weakened state. "Rest," he told her gently. "We'll talk later." Elijah accompanied the paramedics as they carried Zara from the plane. At the doorway, he turned back to address Heather Mitchell, Raymond Davis, and the remaining passengers. "What happened today wasn't just poor service," he stated clearly. "It was discrimination, and it could have had fatal consequences. This isn't over." As Elijah exited the aircraft, the weight of his words hung in the air. No one doubted that this powerful man would keep his promise. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Gerald Barnes, CEO of Skyline Airways, was already receiving urgent text messages from his public relations team about the incident. What none of them yet realized was just how thoroughly Elijah Johnson was about to transform their airline, and potentially the entire industry's approach to discrimination in air travel. Cleveland Memorial Hospital's emergency department burst into action as paramedics wheeled Zara Johnson through the automatic doors. Elijah strode alongside the stretcher, one hand resting protectively on his daughter's arm, while the other held his phone, where Jennifer was coordinating responses to the rapidly spreading social media posts about the incident. 17-year-old female sickle cell crisis. Oxygen saturation. 92% pain level, reported 9 out of 10, before losing consciousness, the lead paramedic reported to the receiving nurse. Trauma Bay 3. The charge nurse directed, barely glancing at Elijah. "Sir, you'll need to wait in the—" "I'm staying with my daughter," he stated firmly, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The nurse assessed him quickly, noting his expensive suit now rumpled from travel and the intense focus in his eyes, and made a calculation about the path of least resistance. "Fine, but stay out of the medical team's way." As doctors and nurses swarmed around Zara, Elijah stood in the corner of the trauma bay, a silent sentinel watching every movement with hawk-like intensity. Dr. Leslie Wong, the attending physician, called out orders for IV fluids, oxygen, and pain management while conducting her initial assessment. "Has she had crises before?" Dr. Wong asked without looking up from her examination. "Yes," Elijah replied. 3 major episodes in the past 5 years. Her hematologist is Dr. Lawson at Boston Children's." Dr. Wong nodded, continuing her methodical work. "We'll contact him for her records. Meanwhile, we'll start standard protocol, and I've already sent her complete medical file to your hospital system," Elijah interrupted. "Jennifer, my assistant, emailed it to your director of medicine 10 minutes ago." This caused Dr. Wong to pause and finally look directly at Elijah. "And you are Elijah Johnson, Zara's father." If the name registered with Dr. Wong, she didn't show it. "Well, Mr. Johnson, we appreciate your efficiency, but we still need to follow our procedures." Of course, he agreed. "I'm simply ensuring you have all the information you need to treat my daughter properly." An hour later, Zara had been stabilized and transferred to a private room in the pediatric wing. Elijah sat beside her bed reviewing emails on his tablet while monitoring her steady breathing. The pain medications had allowed her to fall into a restful sleep for the first time since the crisis began. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit. "Mr. Johnson, Gerald Barnes, CEO of Skyline Airways." Elijah didn't rise or offer his hand. "You made good time from Chicago, Mr. Barnes." Barnes shifted, uncomfortably surprised that Johnson knew his location. "I was actually in Detroit for a conference. I came as soon as I heard about the unfortunate incident involving your daughter." "Unfortunate incident?" Elijah repeated, his voice flat. "Is that what your PR team is calling it?" "Mr. Johnson, I want to personally assure you that what happened today does not reflect Skyline's values or training protocols. We're conducting a thorough investigation." "Save the corporate speak," Elijah interrupted. "Your senior flight attendant ignored my daughter's medical condition, delayed treatment, and suggested she was on drugs. That's not an unfortunate incident. It's discrimination that nearly cost my daughter her life." Barnes adjusted his tie. "I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be. Skyline takes these allegations very seriously." Allegations. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "There are at least a dozen videos circulating online showing exactly what happened. Your employee's behavior is documented from multiple angles." Before Barnes could respond, another knock came at the door. Raymond Davis stood in the doorway, still in his Skyline uniform, though clearly off-duty. "I'm sorry to intrude," Raymond said. "I wanted to check on Zara. The nurses said it was okay to visit briefly." Elijah gestured for him to enter. "Mr. Davis, thank you for coming." Gerald Barnes' expression tightened. "Raymond, I wasn't aware you were planning to visit. This isn't an official company matter at this point. I'm here as a person concerned about a passenger." I tried to help not as a Skyline employee, Raymond replied evenly. Elijah studied Raymond thoughtfully. Mr. Davis was the only crew member who took appropriate action when Zara needed help. Raymond moved closer to Zara's bed. How is she doing? Stabilized, Elijah replied. The doctors say she'll recover fully with proper treatment. He turned back to Barnes. Mr. Davis, would you say today's incident was isolated or part of a pattern at Skyline? Barnes interjected quickly. I don't think this is inappropriate. It wasn't isolated, Raymond stated firmly. This was Heather's third discriminatory incident that I know of personally, Raymond Barnes warned. Last year, she reported a Muslim passenger for suspicious behavior when he was reading religious texts. Raymond continued ignoring his CEO. 6 months ago, she challenged a black family's first-class tickets until the father showed diplomatic credentials. Both incidents were reported, but HR classified them as misunderstandings without disciplinary action. Elijah's expression darkened. So your company was aware of this flight attendant's history of racial profiling. Barnes spread his hands placatingly. These situations are complex, Mr. Johnson. Without full context, the context is clear. Elijah cut him off. Your company has a documented pattern of ignoring discrimination complaints. As their conversation continued, a young resident entered to check Zara's vitals. She hesitated when she saw the group, then proceeded to examine Zara while pretending the men weren't there. Blood pressure's good, she murmured, making notes in the chart. Oxygen saturation improving. When can she be transferred to Boston? Elijah asked. The resident glanced up, seeming to notice Elijah for the first time. I'm not sure Dr. Wong would need to. I'd like to speak with Dr. Wong about arranging an air ambulance, Elijah said. Air ambulance, the resident repeated, looking confused. Insurance typically doesn't. Cost isn't a concern, Elijah stated. The resident's eyes widened slightly as she finally registered who might be sitting before her. She looked from Elijah to Barnes, noting the tension, then back to her patient. I'll have Dr. Wong come speak with you. After she left, Raymond shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Johnson? I should go. I just wanted to make sure Zara was okay. Thank you for coming, Elijah said sincerely, and for standing up for my daughter when others wouldn't. As Raymond turned to leave, Zara stirred her eyes, fluttering open. Dad, she murmured. Elijah immediately moved closer. I'm here, sweetheart. Zara's gaze wandered the room, landing on Raymond. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. You helped me on the plane. Raymond smiled gently. Just doing my job. No, she said softly. The other one didn't. Thank you. The simple exchange seemed to affect Raymond deeply. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. After Raymond left, Gerald Barnes attempted to regain control of the conversation. Mr. Johnson, I'd like to discuss how we can make this right. Skyline is prepared to offer full compensation for medical expenses, complimentary lifetime first-class travel for both you and your daughter, and Mr. Barnes. Elijah interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. Do you know why Zara was traveling to Boston? Barnes faltered. I believe it was mentioned. She's a student. She was heading to the National Youth Science Competition, where she was presenting research on genetic markers for sickle cell anemia. Research that could potentially help millions of people with the condition. Elijah's gaze never left Zara, who had drifted back to sleep. My daughter has spent her entire life battling not just a painful disease, but the assumptions people make about her because of how she looks. He finally turned to face the airline CEO. This isn't about free tickets or hush money. It's about ensuring no other passenger experiences what Zara did today. Your company has a systemic problem, Mr. Barnes, and no amount of compensation will make me forget that. Barnes cleared his throat. I assure you, we take diversity and inclusion very seriously at Skyline. We have training programs, clearly insufficient ones, Elijah noted. Tell me what percentage of your executive leadership team is black. The CEO shifted uncomfortably. I'd have to check the exact figures, but we're working to improve our diversity at all levels. I'll save you the trouble. It's 4%, Elijah said. I had Jennifer run the numbers while we were flying here. Your board is even less diverse at 2%, despite serving a customer base that's approximately 13% black. Barnes opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah continued, "This conversation isn't over, Mr. Barnes. But right now, my priority is my daughter's well-being. I'll have my team contact yours tomorrow to discuss next steps." Recognizing dismissal when he heard it, Barnes nodded stiffly. "I understand. Please know that Skyline Airways deeply regrets what happened today." After Barnes left, Elijah turned back to Zara, gently brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. When her eyes opened again, they were clearer than before. "Did I mess everything up?" she asked, her voice small. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. The competition can wait," he assured her. "Your health comes first." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to be normal to travel by myself without everyone treating me differently." Elijah's heart ached as he took her hand. "I know it's always like this," she continued, her voice strengthening with frustration. "At school and stores everywhere. People look at me and see a problem before they see a person. Even with the best education, the right clothes, the perfect manners, it's never enough." The painful truth of her words hung between them. Elijah had spent his career building technological solutions, solving complex problems with code and innovation. But the problem his daughter faced, the same problem he'd faced throughout his own journey, couldn't be solved with algorithms or billion-dollar investments. "We'll fight this," he promised her. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's been treated the way you were today." As Zara drifted back to sleep, Elijah's resolve hardened. Gerald Barnes had no idea what was coming, because this wasn't just about one incident on one flight. This was about changing a system that had been broken for far too long. By morning, the incident on Skyline Flight 347 had exploded across social media platforms and news outlets. Shaky smartphone videos showed Zara unconscious in the aisle, Heather Mitchell's dismissive attitude, and Elijah Johnson's authoritative entrance onto the plane. Hashtags like number flying, while black and number skyline discrimination were trending nationwide. At Cleveland Memorial Hospital, Elijah sat in a chair beside Zara's bed, scanning news coverage on his tablet. Outside, hospital security kept a growing contingent of reporters at bay, all hungry for statements from the tech billionaire whose daughter had become the latest face of transportation discrimination. "Dad, you're trending," Zara said weakly, glancing at her own phone, despite the doctor's recommendations to rest. "Some people are calling you Aviation Avenger." Elijah smiled despite himself. "How are you feeling? Better still tired?" She scrolled through her feed. "They're really coming after that flight attendant." "Heather Mitchell," Elijah supplied. "She gave an interview this morning already." "What did she say?" Elijah hesitated, but Zara fixed him with a look. "Dad, I need to know." With a sigh, he handed over his tablet. On screen, Heather Mitchell sat in what appeared to be her living room, speaking to a sympathetic local news reporter. "Already, what did she say?" "But the passenger had a medical alert bracelet," the interviewer pointed out. With a sigh, he handed over his tablet. On screen, Heather Mitchell sat in what appeared to be her living room, speaking to a sympathetic local news reporter. Zara handed the tablet back to her father, her expression unreadable. "She's lying," she said. "Finally, I told her I had sickle cell anemia before I passed out, and my bracelet was visible. I made sure of it when I boarded, like I always do." Elijah nodded. "I know she's going to get away with it, isn't she?" Zara asked, a familiar resignation in her voice that broke Elijah's heart. "The airline will say they're reviewing the incident, and nothing will change." "Not this time," Elijah promised. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Skyline's statement just released. Watching now, Elijah switched to a live news feed where Gerald Barnes stood at a podium in Skyline Chicago headquarters, facing a room full of reporters. Skyline Airways deeply regrets the incident that occurred on Flight 347 yesterday. Barnes began reading from prepared remarks. "We have reached out to the Johnson family to express our sincere apologies for their experience, which does not reflect our company values." He continued with corporate platitudes about diversity and inclusion, commitment to customer service, and ongoing training programs. We are conducting a thorough review of the incident and will take appropriate action based on our findings. In the meantime, the crew members involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. As Barnes opened the floor to questions, a black female reporter from the Chicago Tribune rose first. "Mr. Barnes, this isn't the first racial discrimination complaint against Skyline. Last year, your airline settled 3 separate lawsuits involving treatment of minority passengers. Is there a systemic issue at play here?" Barnes gripped the podium tighter. "Those cases were resolved without admission of wrongdoing. Skyline does not tolerate discrimination in any form. Then why does it keep happening?" the reporter pressed. "As I said, we're investigating this specific incident. Mr. Barnes, another reporter cut in sources within Skyline, have informed us that flight attendant Heather Mitchell has been the subject of at least 2 previous discrimination complaints that were dismissed without disciplinary action. Can you comment on that?" Barnes's practiced composure slipped momentarily. "I cannot comment on personnel matters, but I assure you all complaints are taken seriously and investigated thoroughly." Zara looked at her father. "Sources within Skyline." Elijah shrugged innocently. Raymond Davis seems to have found his voice. The press conference continued to derail as reporters dug into Skyline's history of discrimination complaints and their handling of such incidents. By the time Barnes retreated from the podium, his company stock had dropped 3%. Later that afternoon, as doctors prepared Zara for transfer to Boston Children's Hospital, Elijah received a call from an old friend, Congresswoman Maya Richardson. "Elijah," she greeted him warmly. "I saw what happened to Zara." "Is she all right recovering?" he replied. "Thank you for calling, Maya. This isn't just a courtesy call," she admitted. "The Transportation Committee is considering hearings on discrimination in commercial aviation. Your daughter's case could be the tipping point. We need to push for meaningful regulations." Elijah considered this. Zara's been through enough without becoming the face of congressional hearings. "I understand," Maya said, "but this isn't just about Zara. It's about all the passengers who face this treatment without having a billionaire father to advocate for them." The words hit home. "Let me discuss it with Zara. She's old enough to make her own decision about this." After ending the call, Elijah turned to find his daughter watching him intently. "Was that about me?" she asked. "Congresswoman Richardson wants to use what happened to push for new anti-discrimination regulations for airlines." Zara was silent for a moment. "Would I have to testify?" "Not if you don't want to," Elijah assured her. "This is entirely your choice." She looked down at her hands, then met her father's eyes with determination. "Remember when Mom was in the hospital that last time?" Elijah nodded, his throat tightening. "The nurse who wouldn't give her pain medication," Zara continued. "She kept saying Mom was drug-seeking. I was only 7, but I knew something was wrong about how they treated her." "Your mother never wanted you to see that," Elijah said softly. "But I did see it. And yesterday, on that plane, it was happening to me." Zara's voice grew stronger. "It's never going to stop unless someone makes it stop." Before Elijah could respond, his tablet chimed with a news alert. Heather Mitchell had given another interview this time, claiming she felt threatened by Elijah's aggressive behavior on the plane and suggesting his wealth and influence were creating a witch hunt against her. "She's playing the victim now," Zara observed, reading over her father's shoulder. Elijah's expression hardened. "This stops now." Within an hour, his legal team had issued a statement addressing Heather's claims point by point, accompanied by time-stamped video from multiple passengers showing Elijah's calm demeanor throughout the confrontation. They also announced Elijah's intention to file a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. By evening, as the air ambulance prepared to transport Zara to Boston, the media narrative had shifted dramatically. Skyline's handling of the incident, both before and after it went public, was being scrutinized by industry analysts, civil rights organizations, and everyday consumers threatening boycotts. In his hotel room that night, Elijah received an unexpected call from Malcolm Turner, chairman of Skyline's board of directors. Elijah Turner began cautiously, "We've known each other for 20 years. Can we discuss this situation like reasonable businessmen?" My daughter could have died because your employee saw her black skin and assumed drug addict instead of medical emergency, Elijah replied coldly. There's nothing reasonable about that. I agree completely, Turner said, surprising Elijah. What happened was inexcusable. Barnes has been handling this all wrong. That's why I'm calling directly. The board wants to make meaningful changes, not just issue statements. Elijah's skepticism was evident in his silence. We'd like to meet with you, Turner continued, not to settle or silence you, but to genuinely address the systemic issues you've rightly identified. Elijah thought of Zara's determination to prevent others from experiencing what she had endured. I'll consider it, he finally replied, but only after my daughter is fully recovered and only if Raymond Davis is protected from retaliation for speaking out. Agreed, Turner said quickly. And Elijah, for what it's worth, I'm truly sorry about what happened to Zara. After ending the call, Elijah stared out the hotel window at Cleveland's night skyline. The incident had awakened something in him, a recognition that his strategy of quiet success and leading by example wasn't enough. His wealth and influence gave him a platform and responsibility that went beyond building innovative technology. For the first time since building his company, Elijah was prepared to step fully into the public spotlight, not for business advancement, but for justice. And Skyline Airways was about to discover exactly what that meant. 3 days after the incident on Skyline Flight 347, Elijah Johnson sat in the private patient room at Boston Children's Hospital watching Zara sleep peacefully. Her condition had stabilized color returning to her cheeks as the specialized medical team managed her recovery. Outside, a discreet security detail kept persistent reporters and curious onlookers at bay. The soft ping of Elijah's tablet announced an incoming secure message from Jennifer. Financial analysis complete. Ready when you are. Elijah glanced at his sleeping daughter once more before stepping into the adjoining family suite. He opened the encrypted document, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. What he saw confirmed his suspicions and solidified his plan. Horizon Technologies Investment Division. Johnson Capital Partners held a 7.8% stake in Skyline Airways' parent company, making them the fourth largest shareholder. It was a position he had largely forgotten about, one of dozens of transportation investments in their diversified portfolio. Now, however, it represented leverage. As Elijah reviewed the financial data, his phone rang. The screen displayed Gerald Barnes, Skyline CEO. Mr. Barnes, Elijah answered coolly. I'm surprised to hear from you directly. Mr. Johnson Barnes replied, his tone conciliatory. I wanted to personally update you on the actions we're taking regarding the unfortunate incident involving your daughter. I'm listening. We've placed Miss Mitchell on unpaid administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're also implementing an immediate review of our medical response protocols and scheduling company-wide sensitivity training sessions. Elijah remained silent, letting the CEO fill the uncomfortable pause. Additionally, Barnes continued hastily. Skyline would like to offer a comprehensive settlement package including full coverage of all medical expenses, compensation for emotional distress, and lifetime first-class travel privileges for both you and your daughter. Is that all? Elijah asked, his voice betraying no emotion. We're also prepared to make a substantial donation to a charity of your choice focused on sickle cell anemia research, Barnes added. We sincerely want to make this right. Additionally, Barnes continued hastily. Skyline would like to offer a comprehensive settlement package including full coverage of all medical expenses, compensation for emotional distress, and lifetime first-class travel privileges for both you and your daughter. Barnes cleared his throat. That would be the standard procedure for resolving such matters. Yes, Mr. Barnes, do you know what my daughter said when I told her about your likely offer? Elijah asked. I couldn't presume. She said, Dad, this isn't about money or perks. Elijah's voice hardened. And she's absolutely right. This is about a systemic failure that nearly cost my daughter her life. A failure your company has repeatedly refused to address despite multiple incidents. Mr. Johnson, I assure you, I'm not interested in your assurances, Elijah interrupted. I'm interested in structural change, and since Skyline seems incapable of implementing that change on its own, I'll be taking a more direct approach. What exactly does that mean? Barnes asked, alarm evident in his voice. It means I'll see you at tomorrow's emergency board meeting, Elijah replied before ending the call. The following morning, Elijah entered Skyline Chicago headquarters, flanked by his legal team and investment advisors. In the marble lobby, Raymond Davis waited nervously in civilian clothes. Mr. Davis. Elijah greeted him, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Thank you for asking me to be here. Raymond replied. How's Zara improving every day? She asked me to convey her personal thanks for your intervention. As they rode the elevator to the executive floor, Raymond shifted uncomfortably. I should tell you, Mr. Johnson, I've been informed my position is under review, despite your condition that I be protected from retaliation. Elijah's expression darkened. Noted. The boardroom fell silent as Elijah entered. Around the polished table sat the 12 members of Skyline's board of directors, 11 white men and 1 Asian woman. At the head of the table, Gerald Barnes stood to greet them, his smile strained. Mr. Johnson, while we appreciate your concern, this is a closed board meeting. Your advisors and he glanced at Raymond. Other guests will need to wait outside. Malcolm Turner, the board chairman, intervened. Actually, Gerald, I invited Mr. Johnson as a major shareholder. His team is welcome. Barnes' smile faltered. I wasn't aware that you were an investor in Skyline, Mr. Johnson. There are many things you aren't aware of, Mr. Barnes, Elijah replied evenly. That's becoming increasingly clear. As the meeting commenced, Elijah remained quiet, allowing Barnes to present his proposed response to the public relations challenge created by the incident. The CEO outlined a 3-point plan, a public apology sensitivity training for flight crews, and a private settlement with the Johnson family. When Barnes finished, Turner turned to Elijah. Mr. Johnson, the floor is yours. Elijah rose, buttoning his suit jacket as he addressed the board. Gentlemen, and Miss Chen. He nodded to the lone woman. What Mr. Barnes has presented is not a solution. It's a band-aid on a gunshot wound. He activated the room's display screen, showing a timeline of documented discrimination incidents involving Skyline over the past 5 years. These 27 cases represent only those that were formally reported or resulted in legal action. Based on industry statistics, the actual number is likely 10 times higher. When Barnes finished, Turner turned to Elijah. Mr. Johnson, the floor is yours. He switched to a new slide showing the airline's leadership structure. Your executive team is 89% white in an industry that serves an increasingly diverse customer base. Your diversity initiatives are underfunded and understaffed. Your amphibious training is outdated and ineffective. Barnes attempted to interject, but Turner silenced him with a raised hand. What happened to my daughter wasn't an isolated incident or a rogue employee, Elijah continued. It was the predictable result of systemic failures that start right here in this room. He looked each board member in the eye before continuing. Through Johnson Capital Partners, I control nearly 8% of this company. I've already been in discussions with other institutional investors who share my concerns about Skyline's cultural and leadership deficiencies. Barnes paused visibly. Are you threatening a hostile takeover? I'm offering a choice, Elijah corrected. Either implement meaningful structural changes, including executive leadership diversity initiatives, medical response protocols, and accountability measures, or prepare for a proxy fight at the next shareholder meeting. Based on my conversations with other investors, I'm confident I can secure enough votes to replace this entire board. The room erupted in protests and questions until Turner banged his gavel for order. What exactly are you proposing? Elijah Turner asked, using his first name for the first time. Elijah nodded to his team, who distributed detailed proposal documents to each board member. My full recommendations are in these materials. The key points include establishing an independent oversight committee for discrimination complaints, revising medical emergency protocols, implementing a senior leadership diversity initiative with measurable benchmarks, and creating a passenger bill of rights with real enforcement mechanisms. And if we refuse one board member challenged, then I will use every resource at my disposal, legal, financial, and public, to force change. Elijah stated calmly, starting with a formal SEC complaint about the board's failure to address known risks to shareholder value. Before anyone could respond, the boardroom door opened and Gerald Barnes' assistant entered with an urgent message. Barnes read it, his face draining of color. The FAA has just announced a review of our medical response protocols fleet-wide, he announced. And the Department of Transportation is launching an investigation into our handling of discrimination complaints. Elijah betrayed no surprise at the news he had anticipated. His connections in Washington, including Congresswoman Richardson, had moved quickly. It seems the choice is becoming clearer by the minute, Turner observed dryly. After an hour of heated discussion, the board called for a short recess. In the hallway outside, Raymond approached Elijah. "They're going to try to save Barnes," he warned. "He's got allies on the board." Elijah nodded. "I expected as much. How are you holding up?" Honestly terrified, Raymond admitted, but also relieved. This needed to happen. When the meeting reconvened, Turner announced that the board would accept most of Elijah's proposals with some modifications to be negotiated. However, they were standing behind CEO Gerald Barnes, citing his strong leadership during this challenging time. Elijah waited for their murmurs to subside before responding. "That's unacceptable." He motioned to Raymond, who stepped forward nervously, but with determination. For the next 20 minutes, Raymond detailed a pattern of ignored complaints, buried reports, and explicit instructions to manage discrimination incidents without creating paper trails. Miss Mitchell was protected after previous incidents because addressing them might have opened the company to liability, Raymond explained. That directive came directly from Mr. Barnes. Barnes surged to his feet. "This is slander. You can't possibly." "Every statement Mr. Davis has made is supported by documentation." Elijah interrupted as his legal team distributed additional materials, emails, meeting minutes, and testimony from other employees who have agreed to come forward. The board members leafed through the new evidence in stunned silence. "Gentlemen," Miss Chen, Elijah said, rising to his feet, "I came here hoping for cooperation, but I'm prepared for confrontation. The choice is yours. Implement comprehensive changes, including leadership, or face the consequences. I'll give you until tomorrow morning to decide." As Elijah and his team prepared to leave, Barnes made one last desperate attempt. "You're making a mistake, Johnson," he hissed. "This company has weathered bigger storms than you." He motioned to Raymond, who stepped forward nervously but with determination. For the next 20 minutes, Raymond detailed a pattern of ignored complaints, buried reports, and explicit instructions to manage discrimination incidents without creating paper trails. The board members leafed through the new evidence in stunned silence. Elijah regarded him coolly. "Mr. Barnes, I built a technology empire from nothing while facing discrimination at every step. My daughter nearly died because of the culture you've allowed to flourish at this airline. If you think I'm just another storm to weather, you fundamentally misunderstand what you're facing." "You really did it," she said. "You changed everything." "We did," Elijah corrected. "Your courage started this, Zara. I just finished what you began." As Elijah shared the news with Zara in her hospital room, she studied her father with newfound appreciation. 3 months after the incident on Skyline Flight 347, Zara Johnson stood at the podium of the National Youth Science Competition in Boston, her research on genetic markers for sickle cell anemia projected on the screen behind her. The audience of scientists, educators, and fellow student researchers listened intently as she explained how her findings could potentially lead to earlier intervention and more personalized treatment plans for patients. As father and daughter discussed the changes ahead, neither could fully anticipate how their ordeal would transform not just one airline, but potentially the entire industry's approach to discrimination and medical emergencies. The power play had succeeded beyond their expectations, turning a personal tragedy into the catalyst for systemic change. As applause filled the auditorium, Zara's gaze found her father in the front row, his proud smile mirroring her own sense of accomplishment. The path to this moment had been far from straightforward. After her emergency treatment at Boston Children's Hospital, Zara had spent weeks recovering physically from the sickle cell crisis and emotionally from the traumatic discrimination she had experienced. Throughout her recovery, she had worked remotely on her research, determined not to let what happened derail her scientific aspirations. The competition organizers had made a rare exception to allow her delayed entry, partly due to the publicity surrounding her case, but primarily because of the groundbreaking nature of her research. Now standing before the judges and her peers, Zara felt a profound sense of vindication. By identifying these specific genetic variations, Zara concluded her voice strong and clear. We can predict which patients are more likely to experience severe crises and tailor preventative measures accordingly. This approach could reduce hospitalization rates by up to 40% and significantly improve quality of life for the millions living with sickle cell disease worldwide. Backstage after the ceremony, Zara embraced her father tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," Elijah corrected, holding her at arm's length to look into her eyes. "This is all you, not just the competition," Zara clarified. "Everything that's happened since the flight that changes." When the winners were announced later that evening, Zara's name was called for first place as she accepted the Crystal Trophy, and research grant flashbulbs popped and journalists scribbled notes. Her story had transcended the initial viral moment to become something more meaningful, a symbol of resilience and the catalyst for genuine change. Following the emergency board meeting and Gerald Barnes's resignation, Skyline Airways had undergone a corporate metamorphosis. Darius Williams, the interim CEO, had quickly proven himself worthy of the permanent position. Under his leadership, the airline had implemented all of Elijah's proposed reforms and more. Heather Mitchell and several executives had been fired for their roles in fostering a discriminatory culture. Raymond Davis had been promoted to head the newly created Passenger Advocacy and Inclusion Department, where he overhauled training protocols for flight crews. The most visible change for passengers was Skyline's new medical response system. All flight attendants now received comprehensive training on recognizing medical emergencies with specific modules on conditions more common in minority populations, including sickle cell disease. Medical alert jewelry was given immediate priority, and assumptions about passenger behavior were explicitly removed from the response protocol. But the impact extended far beyond Skyline. Elijah had established the Johnson Transportation Justice Foundation using $50 million of his personal fortune to advocate for equitable treatment in all forms of public transportation. The foundation provided legal support for victims of discrimination, funded research on bias in transit systems, and worked with companies to improve their policies and training. Congresswoman Maya Richardson had successfully pushed for congressional hearings on discrimination in commercial aviation, where both Zara and Raymond had provided powerful testimony. The hearings had led to new Department of Transportation regulations requiring airlines to report and address discrimination complaints through an independent review process. Dad, Zara said as they walked toward the exit, her trophy cradled in her arms. "Do you remember what you said to me in the hospital about how this wasn't just about me?" Elijah nodded. "You were right," she continued. "Last week, I got an email from a girl in Atlanta with sickle cell. She said, watching our story made her feel seen for the first time. She's starting pre-med classes next fall." Elijah smiled, feeling a familiar ache in his chest, the bittersweet pride Victoria would have felt seeing their daughter's impact on the world. Outside the venue, a sleek Skyline Airways corporate car waited to transport them to the airport for their return flight to Atlanta. The driver, a young black man in a crisp uniform, opened the door with a respectful nod. "Congratulations, Miss Johnson," he said. "We've been following your achievement at Skyline headquarters." As they settled into the back seat, Zara glanced at her father. "Are you sure about this? We could still take your jet?" "I'm sure," Elijah replied. "It's important to see if real change has happened." Boy, 2 hours later, they boarded Skyline Flight 1047 from Boston to Atlanta. The first-class flight attendant, a middle-aged black woman named Denise, welcomed them warmly, with no hint of the suspicion Zara had faced 3 months earlier. "Miss Johnson, we have your medical information on file," Denise said discreetly. "I just want to confirm you have your medication accessible, and please don't hesitate to alert us if you need anything during the flight." Zara exchanged a meaningful look with her father. This simple acknowledgement represented the transformation they had fought for. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Zara opened her laptop to review her research notes. On the screen was also a draft of the speech she had been invited to give at next month's National Medical Association conference, a presentation on discrimination in healthcare and its impact on patient outcomes. "When Mum died," she said quietly to her father, "I promised myself I'd find a way to help people with sickle cell. I thought that would only happen through science." Elijah studied his daughter's face, seeing both Victoria's determination and his own strategic mind reflected there. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs happen outside the laboratory. What we did changing Skyline, the new regulations, the foundation, it might help more people than my research ever could, Zara admitted. "Miss Johnson, we have your medical information on file," Denise said discreetly. "I just want to confirm you have your medication accessible, and please don't hesitate to alert us if you need anything during the flight." Elijah studied his daughter's face, seeing both Victoria's determination and his own strategic mind reflected there. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs happen outside the laboratory. Zara's attention was drawn to a flight attendant discreetly helping an elderly Latina woman who appeared distressed several rows ahead. The care and immediacy of the response stood in stark contrast to how Zara had been treated. "It's really happening," she murmured. "Change is possible," Elijah agreed. Slow and imperfect, but possible. As the flight continued smoothly toward Atlanta, father and daughter discussed the Foundation's next initiatives and Zara's college plans. The trauma of what had happened would always be part of their story, but it had been transformed into purpose rather than merely pain. When they landed in Atlanta, they were surprised to find Darius Williams, now the permanent CEO of Skyline, waiting to greet them at the gate. "Mr. Johnson, Miss Johnson," he said, extending his hand. "I wanted to personally welcome you and congratulate Zara on her competition victory." "Thank you," Zara replied, somewhat taken aback by the gesture. "I also wanted to let you know that your case study is now part of our mandatory training for all employees," Williams continued. "What happened to you will help ensure it never happens to another passenger." As they walked through the terminal, Williams updated them on the company's progress. Discrimination complaints had decreased by 60%. Medical emergency response times had improved dramatically, and employee satisfaction scores had risen across all demographics. "None of this would have happened without you both," Williams acknowledged, and Raymond Davis Elijah added pointedly. Williams smiled. "Raymond is being promoted next month, Director of Corporate Culture and Inclusion, reporting directly to me." Outside the airport, as they prepared to part ways with Williams, Zara turned to the CEO with a final question. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "After the publicity dies down and my father isn't watching so closely anymore," Williams considered her question seriously. "Change that's forced from outside rarely lasts," he admitted. "But change that transforms from within, that becomes part of the organizational DNA. That kind of change endures. That's what we're building now." As their car pulled away from the terminal, Zara watched the Skyline logo recede in the distance. Ready for takeoff, Elijah asked the familiar phrase carrying new meaning. Ready, Zara confirmed, thinking not just of their journey home, but of all the journeys that lay ahead for her research for the Foundation, and for the countless lives that would be affected by the changes they had set in motion. She knew that what had begun as discrimination on a plane had transformed into something powerful, a reminder that with the right resources, determination and platform systems could change. But she also recognized the sobering truth for every person like her with a billionaire father to advocate for them. Countless others faced discrimination without recourse. That knowledge would fuel her work in the years ahead, turning a moment of crisis into a lifetime of purpose. This powerful story teaches us that discrimination remains deeply embedded in everyday systems, even in seemingly routine settings like air travel. It reveals how racial bias can transform medical emergencies into life-threatening situations when assumptions replace proper care. The contrast between how Zara was treated before and after her father's intervention exposes the unfortunate reality that privilege often determines the quality of service and respect one receives. We learn that meaningful change requires both individual courage and strategic use of power. Raymond's willingness to speak up, Zara's determination to share her story, and Elijah's leverage of his resources all contributed to systemic transformation. The story demonstrates that passive acceptance of discrimination only perpetuates injustice, while active resistance can create ripple effects far beyond a single incident. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative reminds us that true change happens through both personal advocacy and policy reform. While Elijah's wealth provided unique leverage, the most lasting impact came from changing protocols, regulations, and corporate culture changes that will protect countless passengers who don't have billionaire parents to advocate for them. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced while traveling? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Share this with someone who needs to understand how discrimination affects real people in everyday situations. Remember, change begins when we refuse to stay silent. Thank you for watching, and may we all find the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Together, we can transform systems that perpetuate discrimination into ones that protect and respect everyone equally.